Time for another one of these videos that nobody gives a fuck about. My favorite films, 60 to 51. Let's go. Number 60, To Kill a Mockingbird. See, I can love great high-class cinema too, Mom. Yes, I love horror and sci-fi and action movies, but it's not just that. And this is a very fine example, and one of the greatest movies ever made. This is one of the very few times in school where I managed to actually finish a book that was assigned, mainly because I loved it so much. And when we finished it, we immediately watched the movie, and it was also brilliant. It knew what to cut and knew what to keep, and it is a very streamlined version of the novel, but it's still fantastic. Gregory Peck giving one of the greatest performances of all time, playing one of the greatest literary/film characters of all time. Definitely doesn't need an introduction there. I could have also probably classified this as a Superman story, but I think 12 Angry Men did it slightly better. But hey, it's still a worthy contender for one. The kids are phenomenal, surprisingly. The themes are excellently portrayed, everyone plays their parts extremely well, and while it is sad and bleak, it showcases reality very well, and probably something you couldn't get away with in this day and age. Well, considering that the book is still banned just goes to show you how right I am in that respect. Unfortunately. It's said to be one of the greatest movies ever made, and it has more than deserved that title. Number 59, They Live. Now we're back to the alleged schlock. But it's not schlock, it's just brilliant in its own way, a very different way, but different doesn't mean bad. This was essentially John Carpenter's satirization of Reaganomics, and it still works brilliantly today as it did back then. Just tells us a lot about the economic side of our society, huh? Roddy Piper is absolutely great in the lead role. I'm not going to act like he's Daniel Day-Lewis or anything, but in this role he had a decent amount of range to make quizzical everyman and gun-toting badass work fairly well. Keith David is great as always, Buck Flower is always a delight to see, Meg Foster is really great as well, and it's yet another genuinely great Carpenter film that unfortunately falls apart a bit in the third act. However, despite this, still very great. Number 58, The Crow. This is a tough one, but a magnificent one. Well, the first thing that unfortunately gets talked about when this movie is brought up is Brandon Lee's unfortunate death, and that is kind of the looming shadow over this entire production. Despite this, though, it's still a fantastic film. The story, the characters, the neo-Gothic imagery, the themes dealing with revenge and grief are brilliantly displayed here, and it also kicks a lot of ass. Despite not spending a ton of time acting, Lee is so good here, and it's a shame we lost him before he could truly get an actual career. The villains are brilliant sleazeballs, and you absolutely love to hate them. Preuss's direction is fantastic and was the go-to guy in terms of that neo-Gothic imagery, as I said before when talking about Dark City. It is one of the best comic book movies of all time, and I urge that everyone needs to watch this at least once. And remember, it can't rain all the time. Number 57, Rocky. A classic story for the ages. I know that everyone has talked everyone's ears off about this movie, but despite this, it's still a favorite of mine. I think what makes it so good is how the story of Rocky parallels Sly Stallone's story of how he became what he is today. So I kind of like that aspect. It's a simple story of going the distance. Not necessarily about winning or losing, just going as far as you possibly can go. Pushing the boundaries of your life and striving to be the best you can be. The best sports films are never about the sports themselves, and this is probably the prime example. Nothing else really more I could say, because you probably have watched it yourself and love it just as much as I do. And if you don't, you probably just don't have a soul. But hey, I love you anyway, random watcher.
Rocky.
Number 56, Rudy. Yep, another sports movie, but hey, this one's a true story, and it's a great one. Well, yeah, as an outsider looking in, you'll probably see all the ridiculous cliches when it comes to both biopics and sports films. It's filled to the brim with them, and they are certainly hard to ignore, especially when it comes to Dan Devine in the film versus how he really was in real life. However, I still think it's an interesting enough story and a great enough story that it makes it worth watching. As a short king myself, I definitely identify with Rudy a lot, so that might have something to do with it. And it's still well acted, well shot, has an identifiable main character and story, and I do like the motivational aspects. Not the greatest movie ever made, but this is still a winner in my book. Plus, it has Samwise Gamgee playing football. How can you go wrong? Number 55, Mandy. This is definitely more of a you have to watch this for yourself kind of movie. It's simple, but at the same time, also not. It's surrealist, strange, bonkers, and just an absolute joy to watch. Nicolas Cage is at his most insanity in this movie. Probably. The effects and tone are great, and I love Cosmatos' style. This and Beyond the Black Rainbow have a similar visual style, but I found this to be a bit more engaging, despite the latter also being fantastic. From what little he has done, Cosmatos has done a great job as an amateur filmmaker, and I eagerly await his next project. But please, check this out when you get the chance. Number 54, Black Christmas. This had been on my radar for a while, and especially after the second god-awful remake, I thought this deserved a watch. And it was brilliant from start to finish. Similar to the original Halloween, it set up a lot of the hallmarks of the slasher genre, but doesn't necessarily fall into them itself. It feels more like a drama at points, mainly due to the subplot of Olivia Hussey's character getting pregnant and wanting to get an abortion. So that adds a certain layer to this movie that raises it up from being lumped in with the schlock that the horror genre would unfortunately become in the 80s. It's also slower paced, takes its time properly in getting to know these characters and what the overall situation is, and due to the fact that unlike Halloween, it didn't get a sequel, and it makes the ending far more effective, like Halloween's should have been, but I have already talked about that enough. I also absolutely love the phone call scenes. They are so fucking disturbing, and still send a chill down my spine whenever I watch it. It's not for everybody because you'll probably go in expecting low bar crap when it's actually a very well executed drama mystery with plenty of very good horror aspects. This really is the Bob Clark Christmas movie that should be celebrated unanimously, unlike that other overrated garbage that unfortunately is. Number 53, Phantom of the Paradise. I already went over this in my top 15 favorite horror films list, so I'll try my best not to repeat the same things here. This is probably one of Brian De Palma's most underrated films, if not his most. The sources he takes inspiration from are brilliantly intertwined here, and William Finley did a great job as the lead, delivering a very great, but very sympathetic performance. Paul Williams is a scumbag to the highest degree, and Jessica Harper is sort of pulled in all these directions in terms of wanting stardom purely based on her voice, but in the end wanting stardom more than anything. Its over-exaggerated tone is mesmerizing, balance of black comedy and horror is perfectly executed, and it being one of the first major uses of neo-gothic settings and tone is just superb. If you love Brian De Palma, maybe catch this weirder entry because it is fucking fantastic.
Phantom of the Paradise.
Number 52, First Blood. I know for a fact that many people have shooed this off as nothing more than action drivel, when it's a lot more than that. It really pushed the boundaries of what action films were supposed to be at the time. It is an action spectacle, don't get me wrong, but it's more so about Rambo as a character, how he comes back from the Vietnam War, how he has no one, how nobody really wants him around, how he was pretty much bred for war, and that's really the only thing he knows how to do now, and can't survive in the world he left before the war. Its commentary on veterans is very well done, and the ending speech has got to be one of the most heartbreaking monologues in a feature film. And the film probably has Sylvester Stallone's best performance. This is mainly due to the fact that there is a lot more heavy reliance on body language than dialogue, but hey, when he does need to deliver more than just body language, he can do it. The score from Jerry Goldsmith is absolutely terrific as well, but that really doesn't need to be said when it comes to Jerry Goldsmith. Dude is a fucking powerhouse. While I still dislike that they changed the original ending from the novel because I felt it would have been a more heartbreaking gut punch and made more sense. However, when I heard Stallone's reasoning as to why it was changed, I have since accepted it. While people tend to lump this in with the ridiculous sequels of 2 and 3, they tend to forget its humble beginnings and how truly fascinating the first film really is.
First Blood.
Number 51, Full Metal Jacket. Arguably the greatest Vietnam War film of all time next to Platoon and Apocalypse Now. While many find the actual war part of the film to be weaker than the boot camp part, I found the whole film to be very, very great. Michael Modine is a very identifiable main character, and Vincent D'Onofrio, despite only being in a small part of the film, is probably one of its strongest attributes, and really showcased his talent as an actor. R. Lee Ermey really needs no introduction, because if anybody knows anything about this fucking movie, is Ermey's absolutely reprehensible trash talking to all of the recruits. It showcases the dehumanizing effects of war in a proper way, but it doesn't necessarily talk down to the veterans involved in the war, just what really happened over there to the men who were forced to be a part of this horse shit, how it affects certain types of soldiers, and shows a different array about how war affects them. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a Kubrick film. More often than not, people already know how great the film is. So with that, go watch it if you haven't already. So, that does it for this video. We are halfway there, and next month will be the next 10 movies. See you then.